welcome to ET Future of Money. I'm Aloni Bhatt. The second startup on Innovators Launchpad is ProPublica Finance and Investment Services Private Limited, which has a product called Sampatti Cards, targeted especially at domestic workers who are overwhelmingly women. I'm pleased to have with me Saurabh Kumar Karn, who is the co-founder and CEO of ProPublica and has worked for a decade in education, tech, and policy. Saurabh, welcome.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for having me here.
Thanks very much for your time. You know, domestic workers are among the most vulnerable in our society. What led you to bringing out this product for them?
Yeah, it basically started from a personal experience. Early this year, we were just having a conversation with our domestic worker who last year asked us for like a 50,000 rupees loan. We were unable to give her that kind of money, but early this year, when we inquired about what happened to that particular loan, where is the situation and everything, because she needed it for her daughter's education. She basically said that she got it from an informal channel, and the terms of the loan was just appalling, right? Like she borrowed 50,000 rupees and she was paying 2,500 rupees every month, but none of that was for the principal. So despite paying like almost like 10,000-12,000 rupees, she still owed 50,000 rupees, which effectively makes your interest rates go skyrocket, right? Like it's off the charts in that sense, and that felt very unfair to them. We looked at what the data says about domestic workers and their incomes in India, and it just did not. The math didn't add up. We went a little more investigation into, how the loans are or credit problems. Credit is given to the domestic workers as of today, and we realized that there can be disruption there, and that's how the journey of ProPublica Finance and Services Investment Services Private Limited started here.
Okay, so can you flesh out some details on what exactly the product offers and how does it do away with the pain points?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the product really is a phygital card. In India, 25% of the women basically own a smartphone, right? So for them to be onboarded onto a platform or like any sort of a service which basically has digital payment as its infrastructure, it's very difficult. So we had to basically come up with something which works both offline. But at the same time, we realized that the employers most likely have a smartphone and are making UPI payments, right? So we had to basically build an intermediary, which basically ended up becoming Sampatti Card. It's a QR code enabled card where a domestic worker takes this card, goes to the employer scans the card, and that's how the domestic worker and employer relationship happens, right? So this card basically forms a quick contracting between the employer and the employee. Now, when the employer basically makes the payment for the salaries, that basically gets routed to her, and we are able to verify that income. The biggest challenge with respect to the credit provision to the domestic worker is that no one is able to underwrite them very properly because there is no data available with respect to their salaries and things like that. So once that happens, what we are able to do is we are able to generate salary slips for them. We are also able to sort of, provide them with services like, building their PAN cards, doing their ITRs and things like that, all the good documentation that is required to access a loan, so that tomorrow no domestic worker basically has to go to an informal borrower and get a loan at like 50, 100, 200%, which is a really large market. What we are doing is like we are filling the gap that banks and NBFCs find very difficult to do. They are largely doing it through joint liability group model to disburse loans. What we are able to do through our point verification system is establish a contract between employer and employee and able to verify the salary payments made to a particular domestic worker, and use that data to help financial institutions actually realize what is the true credit worthiness of this domestic worker. See, there is no accounting of the salary payment, or even if in case of our domestic worker, she was making the payments regularly, 2,500 rupees every month, right? But none of this gets recorded. What essentially we are looking for is the behavior that the person is not going to default and would be able to pay the loan amount that this person has taken. So the accounting for salary and the credit, your loan repayment, these two things which doesn't get recorded right now, through our platform we are basically recording it so that the formal financial institutions are able to recognize them as good borrowers, which doesn't happen right now. Also because most of these domestic workers are new to credit customers, they don't have a credit score up front. So these documents are the ones that makes it easy for anyone to underwrite loans to them.
At this point, can they make payments with the card?
So card is not for payments, right? Like, so the QR code is not your UPI QR code. That QR code basically attaches to our system. It basically forms a link between the employer and the employee. There are verification messages, there are OTP verifications, and then there are like unique hashes that we sort of use as a mechanism to establish that there was an intent to hire this domestic worker, that this payment was actually made, and that there is no coercion in between, like that there is no one.
But is there a plan to embed payments within it?
Yeah.
A payment
So
over a long period.
no. So this is upfront in our product. We do not rely on a QR code to make the UPI payments. We actually rely on something called UPI deep links. So as an employer, you receive every month you receive a payment link on which if you click through your mobile phone, any of the existing UPI apps, Google, Bheem, PhonePe, whatever you use, you are able to make salary payments. So it's easier for you to make salary payments online than to go to ATM and withdraw cash and to give your maid. So that's
Right.
the employer side of the story. But
Okay.
QR code itself is not a UPI QR code. For the UPI payment, we are using UPI deep links.
Understood. Okay. How do you plan on taking this product to the market? And what's your vision for it?
Yeah. So there are a couple of channels that we have figured out to reach out to our customers. In first is unions. There are a lot of domestic workers union across country, and they are of the of size of like 10,000, 15,000 members. That's one channel that we are actively sort of like approaching, because the awareness is something that the union has already sort of solved for. Because of pandemic, unions basically realized that there is a lot of problem with respect to like salary payments. Domestic workers actually needed loan because most of them lost their jobs, and these problems were just realized, but it was too late to do anything. So there is a huge demand from union side. The other channels that we have are your maid provision services. So maid services, which basically gets a maid to your house to work, they don't necessarily get into the whole business of like streamlining the salary payment. They would most likely take an upfront money for you for them to provide you with a maid, right? We are partnering with them so that their domestic so that all the people that they supply, all the domestic help that they supply, they are able to get all the necessary documents to strengthen their financial standing. They already probably have it, right? Like they already are earning money, but it's just the matter of accounting for that money and the repayment. That is really the big chunk which we are sort of solving for.
And
Yeah.
who tested it in beta? Are you testing it, Saurabh? Can you give us a sense, if at all, that has happened? And what's been the feedback for you?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge that we have at least figured out in our conversations with all the domestic workers is that there is still a lack of awareness with respect to going to the ATM. They find it intimidating. Like bank as an institution itself is intimidating, but like even going to an ATM and working with that machine itself is intimidating a little bit. But at least like our primary research that we have done with respect to domestic workers, 20% of the domestic workers, at least in our sample, have switched to taking money online. So you can Google pay them the money, you can phone pay them the money. But again, right, like if you can phone pay the money, then why Sampatti card, right? The thing is that if you Google pay the money to your domestic worker, there is still no difference between a peer-to-peer payment and a salary payment, right? So there is no attribution of like whether this money was actually sent for the salary, that this is a recurring money
Exactly.
that this person
Yeah.
is going to be receiving. So that basically becomes a problem, and that's why you need a point verification system to sort of ascertain that the domestic worker and employer actually have an employer-employee relationship. So mind you, like there are no liabilities that the employer really has to take. There are no tax liabilities, both from the employer and the domestic worker side. There is nothing. It's just the paperwork is not right now in place, and that's why domestic workers find it very difficult to even apply for a credit in that sense. So that's
You
what we're learning. Yeah.
you being nurtured by the Reserve Bank Innovation Hub. How has that helped? And also, what more would you need to really succeed?
Yeah, no, Reserve Bank Innovation Hub like was probably the biggest thrust to us, like sort of like jumping full time into it. I mean, we very serendipitously like landed on the RBI Sonari tech sprint page. We registered and went through all of that stuff. What like really stood out to, if I have to like sort of like say like a couple of things that like really went well. I think just the curation of both the people and the resources that RBI Innovation Hub did on the platform was excellent, right? We were able to sort of get synthetic data on the Indian consumers, their habits and, their earnings and their like spendings, which basically helps us form like a really good, like, default models and things like that. Otherwise, it would have been like so expensive and so much time taking for us to like gather that data and have any sense of like what the current market really is. Other than that, there were APIs available from n number of banks and things like that, which really helped us like think through our product really, really well. And the other thing is like with respect to the structure, there were scrum calls. The Aditi and entire team basically like ensured that we got all the support, all the questions that we had were answered on time. And just generally, like I think the best experience that we had was pitching it to the panel of experts. The kind of inputs that we received, we would have found it very difficult to get like those insights for our startup, right? And having that early stage matters a lot, right? Like then you are not like sort of wasting your time in doing things that would not be fruitful, or like you're thinking about like, dimensions that you wouldn't have otherwise considered. So in that sense, RBI Innovation Hub has been like very catalytic. Other than that, like just have, the ability to have conversation with a lot of other players, just because, RBI Innovation Hub is someone like who has validated that this is something that that is potentially worth, taking forward. It just opens a lot of doors, right? Like we have been able to speak to a bunch of NBFCs, banks, and other partners just because, despite being very early stage in that sense, because we have been, one of the winners of RBI Innovation Hub Tech Sprint, Sonari Tech Sprint 2022.
All right. Well, Saurabh, CEO and co-founder of ProPublica Finance and Investment Services Private Limited, all the very best. And thank you so much for joining us on ET Future.
Thank you so much for having me here.